Christians, I'm ashamed to say, have been very slow for their theology of the world to catch up with where many non-Christian environmentalists have been for some time. It's only now that Christians are going back to that scripture where it says in John's Gospel, "For God so loved the world that he sent his only Son."
Yes.
And Christians have read that as God so loved human beings. And God so loved creation, every living thing. God so loved the mountains, the streams, the rivers, as well as all the vertebrates, invertebrates and plants, that he sent Jesus to die for everything. In fact, in the Greek, it's cosmos. So it's not just this planet.
That's right.
So let's not discriminate against the rest of the solar system and all of the galaxies out there. God loved everything that he'd made, that he sent Jesus. So that's a Christian understanding, and I would completely understand why, as an atheist, you're shaking your head right now. But I do want, at this point, to point out to viewers, I have worked alongside great teachers of many philosophical viewpoints, good Jewish, Muslim, Christian teachers, good teachers who have no religious affiliation, so agnostics and atheists, some great humanist teachers, but I'd also concede the fact that there are Christians of every thought form who are not very good teachers. And I think, let's start with the point we want every child to be educated by a great enthusiastic teacher who's the consummate professional and understands their subject and motivates the children so that they enjoy learning so much they'll come back to school day by day. And then, you see, with my hat on as Chief Executive of the Association of Christian Teachers, I'm going to wind you up, Loris and Jack, by saying Christians bring something else to the table. They bring a different understanding of the way the world works, which is more complete. And it doesn't mean a Christian science teacher has to teach creationism, but it does mean a Christian science teacher understands... Are you talking
about a Christian scientist or a Christian who is teaching science? Can we?
The latter.
Thank you.
The latter.
We always get confused.
Although, of course, there will be Christian science teachers.
Yes. But this is a Christian who is a science teacher.
That's right.
Right, thank you.
That's right. So, as I say, the jury's out as far as the worldwide church is concerned as to how old the church is, and both of those groups will look to the Bible, they'll pray, they'll believe that they have glimpsed the truth. But the one thing that they are united in is the fact that God made the world and he made it for a particular purpose. In terms of myths and fantasy, and let's just go back to the witchcraft.
Yes, please.
Philosophies and religions come and go. You know, you think if you lived in ancient Egypt, it wouldn't have occurred to you that there were other religions if those are the religions that you followed then. And you think of the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Incas, they all had their religious practices that stretched back through culture hundreds of years, and they believed that they had a clear understanding of the way the world worked. The ancient Greeks, you know, a picture of what planet Earth was and their relationship with the deities living at the top of a mountain. What's distinctive from the point of view of the Jewish and Christian story is that you have a continuous view of the world that has grown and changed as people have known more things, but can trace its origin back over 5,000 years to the times of the Old Testament, and people have been telling the same story and believing the same truth unbroken for that amount of time. Now, you may want to say there have been atheists since time immemorial as well. You're probably right, but I'm going to trump you by saying Adam and Eve knew God before their descendants said he didn't exist.
That's excellent. I mean, I always I love that point, you know, because people are saying, you know, our religion is older than yours, and I say I doubt it, because you can't get older than the beginning. But this brings me an interesting point, which I've always considered, and these two emails highlight that. One of the problems it seems that we have today is evolution is taught in schools. Okay, now that's and it's taught as fact. And of course, both of these writers, both Jack and Lawrence, will be very happy with that. What seems to be unfair is not that evolution is taught, but creationism is not allowed to be taught. In other words, I always have a great belief that if you could put those two things side by side and both were taught honestly, and that's the problem, because you would have a bias one way or the other, quite probably. It seems to me that then you could put the two things side by side and you could choose. And it seems to me that the biggest problem today is that we're actually only giving on some of these issues, and on other issues, we're only giving our kids half the story, and we're not allowing them to choose and to investigate. Do you see that as a problem?
I think you're right to raise the issue that evolution is, and of course there are many schools of evolutionary thought.
Yeah. And we've dealt with that in other programs before.
But evolution itself as a theory is, some scientists would say, it's simply a best fit. They're forensically trying to reconstruct what happened in their own terms a long, long time ago, and they've come to the conclusion there was a Big Bang. And they've extrapolated things as to whether the universe may be expanding or may shrink again in the future. But for them, it tells a story about where we came from, where we are now, and where things might end up. And I'm happy for all young people to be exposed to that as a working theory, and even for scientists to say, given these facts, if we accept them as facts, this is, we've joined the dots, and this is the explanation that we've come to. I think in terms of creationism, I do want children to hear about that, but I also hear the voices of Christian and non-Christian teachers saying, but that's not strictly science. That does come into the realm of explanation, and I'd want to say, as a Christian, it comes into the realms of relationships education, because the story that we're telling is about a relationship that God has with his creation, that God has with the first human beings, and the whole of human history stems from the fact that, yes, there was a talking snake.
Okay, Jack, there was one.
Yeah. But the key point there is, when we talk about sex and relationships education, within school, we're happy to talk about the two and have a single policy for both, but to say, well, the human biology can be dealt with in a science lesson, but the actual relationships, the getting to know someone and understanding your own body and where do babies come from and how do we look after them once they come into the world, the relationships part, that comes in the personal social health education, and with religious education, because it's got ethical dimensions, moral dimensions.
Yes.
And I would say that whether creationism and other stories of creation from other faiths, old and new, I'd like young people to know what the Greeks thought about the way that the world came into be. The Hindu stories, and Lawrence would call them all myths, but the stories about where the world came from, and there are similarities. It's interesting that many of the world faiths, and even faiths, when you talk about South American culture, still talk about a great flood. So it's not something that Jewish scholars made up to put in their Bible. There was a flood that impacted the world so much that many writers around the world chose to incorporate that in their religious story about where the world came from, where it was going, even if they didn't know or had lost touch with the God who created it. They still talked about a flood. And that's a fact that even evolutionary scientists and geologists can't get their heads round, because it's a different sort of evidence saying that human civilizations are agreeing that there was a flood.
Yes. And I can see I'll wind you up, and you just go, we're getting near the end of the program, so I'm going to have to tie up one or two ends here as well. I mean, what you're saying there is excellent, because what it's saying is get to know your facts and bring these in as you can. I think one of the problems, and I know because we deal quite a bit with apologetics in my field, it is learning the facts and learning how to use them.